The day my legs almost gave out beneath someone else's weight was the day my life quietly split into a before and an after, though I didn't know it then. The fire alarm screamed like a wounded animal. The elevators froze between floors, and the stairwell filled with echoing footsteps and panic. 20 floors above the street, with a meeting that could decide my future and a woman who carried authority like a crown suddenly unable to stand. I made a choice that would cost me every ounce of strength I had left. What happened next was not heroic in the way movies show it. It was messy, exhausting, and deeply human. And it changed everything. If you believe that kindness still matters, that second chances can appear in the most unexpected moments, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this live because people like you believe they're worth telling. My name is Noah Carter, and at the time, I was just another overworked junior analyst in a glass and steel office tower in downtown Chicago. The building stood like a monument to ambition, all sharp edges and reflective windows, daring anyone inside to keep up. I'd been there for 3 years, long enough to learn how to keep my head down, answer emails at midnight, and accept that recognition usually flowed upward, never down. I lived alone in a small apartment on the South Side, sent money back home to my mother in Ohio whenever I could, and told myself that one day the sacrifices would add up to something real. My boss, Grace Whitmore, was the kind of woman people noticed without knowing why. She wasn't loud or cruel, and she didn't need to be. She moved through meetings with calm precision, her presence tightening the room like a drawn thread. I had seen grown men stumble over their words in front of her, and I'd seen her defend junior staff when executives tried to bulldoze them. To me, she was distant, almost untouchable, a figure defined by sharp suits, careful smiles, and a reputation for never missing a step. I never imagined I'd see her vulnerable, let alone be responsible for her safety. That morning, the stakes were impossibly high. A group of investors from New York had flown in for a final presentation, one that would determine whether our division survived the coming restructuring. I'd spent nights refining slides, double-checking projections, and rehearsing answers in my head until sleep felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. Grace had entrusted me with critical data, a quiet sign of confidence that meant more to me than any formal praise. I wanted desperately not to let her down. Then the alarm went off. At first, no one took it seriously. People glanced around, annoyed, assuming it was another drill or a technical glitch. But when the lights flickered and the elevators jolted to a stop, the mood shifted. Security announced over the intercom that everyone needed to evacuate via the stairs. 20 floors. No exceptions. I saw Grace hesitate near the stairwell door. Her face, usually composed, had gone pale. She leaned against the wall, her breath shallow, one hand pressed tightly to her knee. I learned later that an old injury had flared up without warning, the result of a college accident she rarely spoke about. In that moment, all I knew was that she couldn't make it down, and time was bleeding away. People streamed past us, eyes forward, focused on their own escape. I remember the smell of concrete dust, the echo of footsteps, the weight of indecision pressing on my chest. The meeting, my job, my carefully constructed future, all of it seemed to balance on the edge of what I did next. Grace tried to straighten, to wave me off with a faint smile that said she'd manage somehow, but her leg buckled again. I crouched in front of her without thinking. I told her I could carry her, that we'd take it one step at a time. Even as the idea formed, doubt flooded in. I wasn't particularly strong. I spent most of my days hunched over a desk, not lifting weights. 20 floors felt impossible, but leaving her there felt worse. Lifting her was harder than I expected, not because she was heavy, but because responsibility is heavier than muscle. Her arms wrapped around my shoulders, tentative at first, then tighter as I found my balance. The stairwell seemed to stretch endlessly above and below us, a concrete spine spiraling through the building. Each step down sent a jolt through my legs, my breath burning in my chest. By the 5th floor, my arms trembled. By the 10th, sweat soaked through my shirt and my vision blurred at the edges. Grace apologized silently with every tense shift of her weight, her forehead resting against my shoulder. I could feel her breathing, steadying as she trusted me to keep going. That trust was both terrifying and grounding. I focused on the rhythm of my steps, the scrape of shoes on concrete, the distant wail of sirens outside. Memories crept in to distract me from the pain. My father teaching me how to ride a bike, letting go too soon, forcing me to find my balance. My mother working double shifts after he passed, never complaining, always insisting we'd be fine. I thought about the promises I'd made to myself, to be reliable, to show up, to do the hard thing even when no one was watching. With every step, those memories seemed to push me forward. By the time we reached the ground floor, my legs were shaking so badly I nearly collapsed. Security rushed over, paramedics were called, and the building slowly emptied onto the street. I lowered Grace onto a bench, my arms numb, my lungs screaming for air. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of my own heartbeat and the cool rush of morning air against my face. The investors' cars idled nearby, their drivers checking watches, impatience written in every line of their posture. I knew the meeting was slipping away. Part of me felt a bitter sting of irony. I had given everything I had, and it still might not be enough. But when I looked at Grace, something in her expression stopped me. The distance I'd always felt between us was gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded. Gratitude, yes, but also recognition, as if she were seeing me clearly for the first time. The meeting went on without us. Another executive stepped in, and the outcome remained uncertain for days. I returned to my desk later that afternoon, exhausted and oddly hollow. Co-workers offered quiet nods, a few whispered words of praise, but the office quickly slipped back into its usual rhythm. I told myself not to expect anything more. Kindness, after all, isn't a transaction. Days passed. My muscles ached, bruises bloomed along my arms, and life resumed its relentless pace. Then, late one evening, as the office lights dimmed and most of the floor emptied out, Grace approached my desk. She looked different somehow. Not weaker, but softer. The sharp lines of her authority eased by something like humility. She thanked me, not with grand gestures or public acknowledgement, but with sincerity that settled deep in my chest. She spoke about fear, about how helplessness can strip away titles and power in an instant. She admitted that letting someone carry her had been harder than the pain itself. And then, in a moment that felt both surreal and profoundly simple, she asked if I'd like to have dinner with her sometime. Not as boss and employee, but as two people who had shared something real. I went home that night walking on air and concrete at the same time. I replayed the stairwell in my mind, the weight, the struggle, the quiet connection forged in exhaustion. Dinner didn't magically fix my career or erase the distance between our lives, but it opened a door I hadn't known existed. We talked about our pasts, our fears, the strange ways life tests us. We laughed, awkwardly at first, then freely. For the first time in years, I felt seen not for my output or potential, but for who I was when it mattered. The weeks that followed were not a fairy tale. There were boundaries to navigate, rumors to ignore, and hard conversations to have. But there was also growth. Grace became a mentor in ways she'd never been before, pushing me to take risks, to believe my voice deserved space in the room. I found myself standing taller, not because I'd carried someone else, but because I'd learned I could carry responsibility without losing myself. Looking back, the stairwell feels like a metaphor I didn't recognize at the time. Life doesn't ask us to be heroes. It asks us to be present when the moment arrives. It asks us to choose compassion over convenience, courage over calculation. Sometimes the reward isn't a promotion or a romance, but the quiet knowledge that you showed up when it counted. As this story draws to a close, if it stirred something in you, if you felt the weight of those steps or the relief of reaching the bottom, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this reach others who might need a reminder that kindness can still change lives. And before the final moment fades, I have one special request. Leave a comment sharing a time when you helped someone without knowing how it would turn out. Because somewhere, in a stairwell you can't yet see, someone might be waiting for exactly that kind of courage.